He would put a price on, if you want to marry my daughter, that's fine. We want to make sure that she loves you and all that, but in exchange for this beautiful girl you're getting, you're going to give me many horses, and they put a number on that. Okay, another way that a warrior could prove his worth, which was more important, was to show bravery in the face of the enemy. To show bravery in the face of the enemy. Show bravery in the face of the enemy. So I'm going to get in a big-time skirmish here with Lloyd, and instead of going up, because I got the advantage, and stab him 6 or 7 times and kill him, I'm going to come over and take, and I'm going to touch him and get back unharmed, show my bravery. Look over again, he's going to be trying to shoot me, and I'm going to slap him across the face and back off. Showing bravery in the face of the enemy was referred to as what? Coup. And keeping track of how many times you did that in battle was known as counting coup. So showing bravery in the face of an enemy was referred to as coup. A warrior would approach an enemy, touch them, and come back unharmed. And keeping track how many times they did that was called counting coup. And what did often they have to do that? Sit is their hand. What did they have? A stick. And they called it a coup stick. Okay? So you'll see that in a lot of different Western movies. Like if you watch Dances with Wolves and some of those type of movies, you'll see a lot of that go on. Okay? Now, who did the first extensive fighting on the part of Native Americans occur between, before the white man got there? Who were they fighting? Each other. And usually the bloodiest encounters between tribes occurred after a chief was killed on one side or the other, or both. So they didn't start fighting and have these tactics only when whites came west of the Mississippi. There was a lot of rivalry among tribes for different things, burial grounds, land, etc. And some of the bloodiest fights between two Indian tribes usually occurred after a chief on either side or both was killed. Now, in these battles, which later went on into the fight against whites, the dead were often scalped and mutilated beyond recognition. And we'll talk more about that later. So during these battles between Indian tribes, many times the dead were scalped and mutilated beyond recognition. So Native Americans didn't just scalp white people, they scalped enemies. That was the idea. And they mutilated them. Now this tradition of scalping and mutilation continued in battles between the Plains Indian warriors and the United States military, which we'll be talking about later. Why did they do that? Why did they mutilate them? Why get in a battle with McGarvin, and so I get done killing her, that's not enough, so I'm going to cut both her arms off and one of her feet.
So when they get to the other side.
That's right. They believed in reincarnation or the afterlife. And so if I died and she died and I met her again in battle, she would all of a sudden occur to fight me without 2 arms and a leg. That's what they believed in. So they believed very much into the afterlife, and they believed that they might meet their enemies in the afterlife, and they wanted to put them at a disadvantage. That's why they did the mutilization. Now, that we talked about religion a little bit, and I'm going to emphasize that when I talk about the warrior. Before going into battle, the Plains Indian warrior often looked to religion for strength. And what was the name of the Native American god? Did they call him God or Jesus Christ? Who did they call him? A Great Spirit. And they would look for strength through the Great Spirit, through what was known as a vision. It was known as a vision. Know what a vision was, anybody? What? A dream, usually induced by what? Peyote. Peyote, peyote in those days. So, fire water, those types of things. So what a vision was a dream. And they would dream how the battle was going to come out. And you can't control dreams, so when these Native American warriors were really ready to go into battle and they smoked peyote and was going to have a vision, obviously they were hoping for a good vision or good dream that would show victory for them on the other side. So that was very important as well. So they were very strong religiously. Okay? Now we're going to move back into subtopics, and we're going to talk about settlers moving westward and the Fort Laramie Treaty. Fort Laramie Treaty. Go ahead.
We
The
backed
Fort
up.
we backed up a little bit. We backed up once to the Fort Laramie Treaty.
Have you seen Young Guns, Mr. Chair?
How many?
Gosh, I love that.
That's one of my all-time favorite movies. That's AOD's.
Yeah. You wanna know what peyote is, watch Young Guns.
Yeah.
There were two areas of land that were very sacred to the Plains Indians, which is gonna lead to this Fort Laramie Treaty. What two areas of land were considered sacred? After listening to what I said. Burial grounds, or spiritual areas, and hunting grounds. Very good. So the two areas of land that were considered very sacred to the Plains Indians that they were going to protect at any cost were Indian spiritual or burial areas and prime hunting grounds. What's happening by the 1850s? We're going to have some westward expansion, and more white settlers are traveling west across the Great Plains, which are occupied by Native Americans. And these settlers are going where? Where are three areas they're going to?
California.
California, Oregon, and you should know this, Utah. Yeah. Okay. So they're going to Oregon, California, and Utah. Okay? And as they're going to those areas, they're moving westward and they're traveling through both these prime hunting grounds and these Indian spiritual areas. And they don't probably doing it on purpose, they don't know, but it's certainly becoming an irritant to Native Americans on the Great Plains because they don't want those settlers traveling through their prime hunting grounds and scaring off the buffalo or shooting the buffalo. And they certainly don't want them tramping over the top of their ancestors' graves, although normally they were up high and on kind of a scaffold, but that was not a place to be. And so because of this, the movement of the white man moving westward, this is threatening the Plains Indians' way of life. And so they began to resist the movement of settlers west because they were going through their backyard, so to speak. Okay, so they began to resist that. And how did they resist that? They either attacked these settlers and killed them or harassed them, and it got to the point where they complained so much about not having free passage west that who got involved? The federal government. So these settlers were being attacked and harassed continually to the point that the federal government was forced to intercede on their behalf. And so in 1851, a treaty was negotiated with 8 different Indian tribes on the plains, including the Sioux. Okay? So in 1851, a treaty was negotiated with 8 different Indian tribes on the Great Plains, including the Sioux. And what was this treaty called? The Fort Laramie Treaty. Fort Laramie Treaty. 1851. Now, when you have a treaty, both sides get something. What do you think that the government wanted? They wanted safety of settlers traveling westward. They wanted something else that would provide that happened, that would ensure that happened. What did they want to do along the western trails? The government. Not quite. Build forts. Very good, Buck. To protect what? These settlers going through. We're going to go visit one of these such forts in about 2 weeks, Fort Phil Kearny. Okay? So, what the government wanted as a result of the Fort Laramie Treaty is they wanted the safety of settlers traveling westward, and they wanted the government to receive permission from those Indian tribes to build forts along those western trails to make sure that safe passage was happening. What did the Indians get in return? $50,000 a year, which was a lot of money in 1851. $50,000 a year those 8 Indian tribes shared in exchange for the safe passage and the allowance to build forts. That treaty was signed by several chiefs, including Sioux Chief Red Cloud. So that was signed by several chiefs from different tribes, and the man that represented the Sioux in this treaty, who signed the treaty, was Chief Red Cloud. Now, I want you to think about this. From 1851 to 1865, the government made these annual payments. The Plains Indians upheld their end of the bargain, and everything went pretty darn smooth from 1851 to 1865. No problems. Suddenly in 1866, it all changed. Why? Why did it go so smoothly for 14, 15 years and then went to pot in 1866? Nope, that wasn't true. That's a good guess, though. No? What's that? Courtney, go. Civil War what? No, you say it. You're right on. What? It happened? But what happened by 1866 in the Civil War? It was over. So you got all these pillaged farms in the South. You got a hell of a mess. So where did people choose to go after the Civil War to start a new life? West. And what happened is more and more and more and more settlers came west. Through those hunting grounds, through those spiritual areas, to the point where the Indians, especially the Sioux, could not take any more. They were okay with the small numbers that were moving west between 1851 and 1865. But in 1866, when that increase in settlers just increased incredibly, they were moving through those hunting grounds and spiritual areas. And finally, there were some Sioux chiefs who stood up and said, I've had enough of this Fort Laramie Treaty. Too many people are coming by. Who were the Sioux chiefs that didn't want to abide by that anymore? Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. So the chiefs of the Sioux tribe, because it was their lands that were getting brutalized, their hunting grounds and their spiritual areas, more than any others because of their location, said they would no longer abide by the Fort Laramie Treaty. And they were about half pissed at who? Well, who signed the first treaty? Red Cloud. Matter of fact, Sitting Bull said, after talking about why he would not abide by the treaty, he said, quote, how can one man represent all of the Sioux? We will not abide by such a treaty. And who was he talking about? Red Cloud. Okay? Got out of hand. So, what would Sitting Bull and his Sioux warriors do from this point on as settlers began to move more and more west? Attack them, harass them, etc. They went right back to those tactics. Okay? But we'll kind of back up a little bit first. Okay? Alright, give you a little break today. We're going to talk about tomorrow the building of forts along the Bozeman Trail. The Bozeman Trail is the trail that they want to build these forts to ensure safe passage to places like Oregon and Utah and California. We're going to talk about the forts, and we're going to talk about one in particular, which is Fort Bill Kearney. All right, I want to get something straight for tomorrow here, just so I know. Tomorrow is Thursday, right? Here's what I have. It doesn't look like, according to Mr. Mortimer, that the field trip that was